Hey guys, today we have a recap of the next episodes of the show. Magne and Vidar are lying unconscious on the pier when an ambulance pulls up. One of the paramedics rushes to Magne with a defibrillator and begins to administer aid. After receiving the shock, Magne instantly regains consciousness and emits a powerful wave that throws the man several meters away. While the second medic tries to help his buddy, Magne approaches Vidar's body. Vidar opens his eyes and whispers the words of a threat. Magne will die before the new moon comes. The lad runs away. At this time in the nursing home, one of the residents, Wotan Wagner, complains to the orderly Halvor about the broken wheelchair. Magne runs into the mountains. He is still shaken by the battle and turns to the bird flying above, blaming it for everything that has happened to him. Suddenly, Magne finds himself in the netherworld, and before him stands the ancient sorceress Volva, who takes the form of Isolde. She reminds him that he must now obtain weapons and find friends, for the other gods will surely come to his aid. Volva asks him not to come here because the giants might kill her too. Then she scoops up something from the glowing bowl and blows it in the guy's face. Magne is immediately alone on the mountain. Annoyed, Vidar rushes to his house and tells Ren and Saxa about the battle that took place. In the meantime, a group of young people are hanging out at a table in a street cafe when Magne comes running to them looking for the cashier. No one knows where she is, but everyone raves about Laurid's speech at the feast. Fjord then returns home and announces that he has not killed Gry. Not only that, he's going to leave home and live with the girl he loves. The boy does not want to take part in the coming battle. When he arrives at Gry's house, he announces his separation from his family. Magne reminds Lauritz of the stories of Ragnarok, but the brother does not take these ancient stories seriously. To prove his new identity, Magne bends a metal bat in front of his brother. Lauritz asks for time to think over what he has said. The next day, the head of the Edda police appears on TV and announces that an investigation has begun into Utul Industries, for which a well-known expert is coming to town. Lauritz is watching the broadcast devouring food. Suddenly, Turid arrives, and she's surprised by his son's voraciousness. In his room, Magne observes an obvious change in his appearance. His muscles are getting bigger and he's getting even stronger. Later, Turid invites the boys to celebrate their father's birthday and shows them a photo of them together. The family goes to their father's grave, where Lauritz makes the statement that the father would obviously be proud of a son who looks like a woman and uses makeup. Here, Magne looks like his father, but Lauritz looks like he's from a different family. Turid smoothes over the unpleasant conversation. On their way home, they meet Erich, and he informs them that by the school board's decision, Magne can return to school. At that moment, Turid asks for help. The car won't start. So Magne pushes the car to the car repair shop, where they are greeted by Harry, the mechanic. And there, Magne gets a clue where he can get the hammer. In the meantime, Vidar is watching a report on TV about the barrels found, while the women take the ancient weapon down. Saxa is annoyed by her refusal to take her in, since she is a member of the family. Agreeing to this, Vidar takes her to the factory and shows her the production when suddenly police arrive. Vidar acts arrogant and defiant. But the girl smooths over her father's behavior at a crucial moment, apologizing for the problems she has caused and promising to do everything she can to solve them. Her father has to admit that she's right. Meanwhile, Magne makes a drawing of Thor's hammer. Turid in the meantime comes to the store and apologizes to Venke for the words she spoke, and the woman asks her to inform his son that he will meet the god on the bridge, for which he must remember Volva's ancient prophecy. Hearing these words, Magne runs to the bridge. He memorizes the first words of the prophecy and tries to read them to passers-by. But everyone just passes by, except Iman, who takes Wotan out for a walk. Magne reads a few lines and the girl continues the text. They go home to Magne and the girl tells him how Wenke activated her powers, saying she was special. Then she tells him to find the chief warrior and help him. Meanwhile, Lauritz arrives at the grill cafe and meets the waiter. He unmistakably identifies the guy as gay and shows his sympathy. Meanwhile, Magne tries to find out about Iman's powers, but the girl can't recall anything supernatural. Back at home, Lauritz shares his hopes with his mother and informs her that young people are coming over tonight to have a party. At this moment they hear very distinctive noises from Magne's room. Mother and son smile. Apparently, Magne has found himself a girlfriend. But it turns out that the boy, demonstrating his strength, has to put Iman on a chair and lift her up with one hand while she bangs on the ceiling and screams. In the evening, fun reigns in the turret house, to which Grai and Fuhr also come. And Iman finally finds her power. She can make anyone do what she wants. And she demonstrates it on one of the guys who, at her command, brings her a drink by moving on his knees. She seems to be the embodiment of the goddess of love and fertility, Freya. Laurit's new mate never arrives, and the distraught lad complains to his mother. He's just ugly. Tipsa reveals the truth to her son. In the morning, Iman and Magne arrive at the workshop, and the girl uses her powers to force Harry to make a hammer from Magne's drawing. In the meantime, Turid goes to Vidar and confesses to him that on the one night they once spent together, she became pregnant. And now is the time when Lauritz needs a man's support very much. And Vidar, thanks to woman. In the evening, on his way home, Magne sees Vidar embracing Lauritz. At night, Turid tries to justify herself to Lauritz. She has never regretted giving birth to him. And she won't mind if the boy gets to know his real father better, which Magne dislikes very much. In Utelheim, Ran trains with her fighting bow, reminding Saxa of her spear. But the girl is completely immersed in the business of the factory. At this point, Vidar informs her of his newfound son, which causes Ran to object. Giants cannot have children by mortals, but Vidar cites fate. And Magne breaks the news to Iman. He then learns that the girl was born in Sri Lanka but grew up in a Norwegian family. She boasts that she can get anything she wants with her powers, which provokes Magne's condemnation. The powers were not given to get new clothes or cheat shopkeepers. At this point, Harry brings the hammer. Lauritz comes to Vidar and he offers to take a motorcycle ride. Meanwhile, Magne and Iman are going to test the hammer, for the real one must always return to Odin. But the hammer just takes off. Making a stop in the mountain, Vidar tries to ferret out something about Magne, but Lauritz gets it right away. Magne retrieves his hammer but cannot understand why it does not work. Meanwhile, Saxa continues to investigate the company's affairs and makes a statement to reporters. Meanwhile, a company of young people are sitting in a grill bar and watching the news. The guys are shocked by the admission that it's dangerous to drink tap water because that's what they were drinking. Fuhr hears Saxa's apology and leaves. One of the girls suggests protesting against the Utuls who have mucked up the fjord. Turid is writing a note to her sons to not drink the tap water when Lauritz and Vidar enter the house. The boy is thrilled. His father has given him a motorcycle. In the meantime, Ran is looking at the pictures in the family album and suddenly brushes away a tear. At this moment, Vidar enters the house and announces that he is ready to take in his new son, which prompts a harsh protest from Ran. Saxa is struck by the abundance of emotion, for Ren has never been jealous of her husband. In the evening, Magne goes to the grill bar and Saxa arrives there as well. Seeing her, the guy pulls out a knife, but the girl just provokes him. At the end of their conversation, they come to the conclusion that their families have lost their minds. Cisterns of drinking water arrive in Edda, and Fuhr receives an invitation from Ran to talk. The woman has arrived at Grei's house and is waiting outside. He listens to his mother's account about the changes in the family and refuses to call Rand his mother. They are merely feigning their relationship. He has no intention of going back and wants nothing to do with the firm. Angry, Rand sees the Sayer family and tries to run them over with her car. But Magne manages to react and pushes his loved ones away. Rand apologizes, pretending to have lost control, but Magne doesn't believe her. He grabs the hammer and runs to Wenke. The old woman is frightened. The giants will kill her if they see them together. She's amazed at Magne's attempt to make the hammer because you can't just get it. She promises to tell him how to forge the real Mjolnir. After all, the giants have an ancient weapon with which they can kill anyone. She begins the story of the eternal fire of the ancient gods but notices Rand and hides in the building, promising Magne to tell him everything when he meets her on the mountain. Lauritz comes to Utelheim and is treated to mead. Vidar tells him that the lad is not human and gives him the heart of a deer he has harvested for him. Lauritz eats the meat and visions of ancient giants flash before him. Vidar grabs his hand and shoves it into the fire. The boy screams, but as he pulls his hand out, the burn disappears right before his eyes. He is now invulnerable. Rand sees this and becomes enraged. While the spouses are quarreling, Lauritz goes to the bathroom and after washing his face sees in the mirror the ancient scoffer, half-brother of Odin and father of the serpent Midgardsorm, Loki. And he understands he is his incarnation. Back in the room he hears Rand say that the cashier is really Vulva, and she's going to kill her before Magne gets the hammer. Meanwhile, Magne comes for Lauritz at Utilheim. He asks his brother to return home, and he reluctantly agrees and tells him of Rand's intentions. Magne runs to Wenki. Meanwhile, she closes up store and goes home. But she sees Rand's car and takes off into the sky as a bird. Magne sees her fly away and is glad everything has turned out to be alright. But suddenly Rand draws her bow and pierces the bird with her arrow. The bird falls near the orphanage. The wounded woman reaches Wotan, hands him her medallion and asks him to help Magne. Magne rushes to her, takes her head in his hands, but the woman turns to ash. Magne cries over what was just his mentor, then runs to Rand's car and threatens to kill her. But the woman is very calm. She reassures the witnesses that the boy is simply sick. Iman pulls him away with difficulty. At night, Magne has a dream in which Isolde begs him not to give up. In the morning, the radio announces that the young people of the town are planning a protest. Turid speaks of Magne's intemperance. You should not shout at the school principal in the middle of the street. To this, Magne reminds her of the attempted murder of their family. But Turid is more concerned about the irrepressible appetite of Lauritz, who boasts to his brother of his newly acquired invulnerability. Magne asks to prove his loyalty and to help break into the Util's house because he thinks the eternal fire burns in their hearth. Lauritz promises to help. Posters and appeals are hung all over Edda to shut down the harmful Util's production, while Fjord and Gry bring her father to the hospital. The girl is grateful to her boyfriend for his support and is delighted when the boy agrees to spend Saturday night with her family. Meanwhile, Wotan examines Wenki's locket and puts it on himself, and at that moment he is awakened to who he really is, the king of the gods, Odin, who sacrificed a night to know eternal wisdom and is able to see the present, past, and the future. He is Thor's father and Loki's twin. Wotan begins to behave intelligently and calls corpseman Halvor a dark elf, which puzzles the man. Meanwhile, Magne continues his training and studies Scandinavian myths, and then sends a message to Iman that he intends to go to Utilheim to forge a hammer there. In the meantime, Turid and Lauritz go to the store, and while Turid is shopping, the boy tortures the man he meets, Erich, with questions about Loki. He tells him that Loki was the father of the snake Midgardsorm, which leads him to believe that Loki was the world's first transgender man. Saxa and Vidar arrive at the square where people are getting clean water in canisters. The girl is convinced that they should show their closeness to the people and then everything will work out, especially since the youth protests are planned. That's where Turid and Lauritz meet them and the latter asks to see Vidar. Saxa goes to the factory to attend to business. When Turid arrives home, she tells them that Lauritz has gone to Utilheim, which angers Magne. They had a deal. Apparently his brother has chosen their side. Meanwhile, Lauritz watches Vidar cook and confesses that he would like to come here more often. When he returns home, he is not given a warm welcome by his brother. But Lauritz earns forgiveness by showing Magne the entrance key to Utilheim he received from Vidar. Meanwhile, there is a dinner party at Gry's house. The father makes a lot of jokes and thanks everyone for what they have been in his life. Gry does not understand what's going on but is glad for a good evening. In the evening, the brothers enter the Util house when no one is there. Magne sticks his hammer into the burning hearth, with absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And when nothing happens, Vidar walks through the door. Tripping over the backpack left by Magne, Util pulls out the hammer. Magne has to come out and admits it's his thing. Vidar realizes what they were up to and kicks the guys out. When they return home, they find Erich at the table, who tells them that Mjolnir was forged by stunted creatures that people called dwarfs. Loki became Odin's sibling by swearing on his blood, and when their blood mixed, he became half god, half giant. At night, Ren tries to persuade Vidar to forget about Laur's deception, and the latter promises to kill the boy. In the morning, Wotan gives blood and admits to Iman that he is Odin. The girl summons Magne, who at that moment is invited to the protest against the Utuls. Fjord, who is immediately present, refuses to go with everyone else. Magne arrives at the nursing home where Wotan greets him but addresses Lauritz rather sternly. He does not believe the boy and tells him to leave, despite Magne's attempt to convince him otherwise. Loki is a traitor by nature, he cannot be trusted. Lauritz is about to leave, but then he sees a table with the blood tests. He tricks the nurse, pulls out Wotan's blood, and injects a portion into his own vein. In the meantime, Fjord watches the protest taking place at the factory gate. Gry goes there with him and supports Magne, believing that it is to his credit. Saxa urges her father to respond, at which point Fjord joins the protesters. He steps forward and makes a speech acknowledging the Utul's guilt and promising to do whatever he can to rectify the situation. After all, we all share the same planet. Looking at this, Lauritz is on the fence. Should he go to Vidar or support his brother? At that moment, Gry receives a text message and the girl runs away. Fjord rushes after her, and Lauritz stops Vidar's car and tells him that he wants to go with him. He gets in his car and makes an indecent gesture to everyone. Gry and Fjord rush to the hospital where the girl's mother tells them about the father's suicide. The man swallowed all the sleeping pills and could not be saved. Vidar and Lauritz arrive at Utilheim. The father tells the boy about how the people used to worship them and carry gifts. He demonstrates to the boy that he can change his appearance. So when he supposedly grew old, the place was taken by his son. Vidar was willing to do anything for him, even making him invulnerable. The truth is, there is a weapon that will kill anyone. Giants do not forgive treachery. Suddenly, Magne bursts into the house. He will not let his brother be hurt. Armed with the axe, Vidar rushes at the lad. A fierce fight ensues, with the enemies exchanging blows. While delivering the next blow, Vidar drives the axe into the wall. Magne pushes the man away, and he lands on the edge of the axe sticking out of the wall. His body turns to ash, which terrifies Magne. Magne suffers deeply from all that has happened and feels guilty about Vidar's murder and the loss of Lauritz, but he cannot confess this to his mother, who is immersed in a relationship with Erich. But she is shaken by the news of Vidar's death. The mother sympathizes with her son and he casts hateful glances at his brother. Gry offers her condolences to Fjord, but the latter stuns the girl with a confession that he did not love his father. Meanwhile, Ran urges Saxa to take revenge, though the daughter is cautious about what has happened. They do not know exactly what has happened, they must be careful. But Ran is fixated on hating Lauritz and plans to take revenge on him specifically. But for now, they announce that Vidar died of a heart attack. The rules of Util Industries state that the rights of ownership should pass to the eldest son, but Saxa intends to usurp the position. Exhausted, Magne goes to Fjord and confesses to the murder of his father. By the rules of the ancient world, he must give satisfaction to a relative of the deceased, but the younger Util refuses to take revenge. Upon returning home, Magne discovers forbidding signs on the entrance to his brother's room. Lauritz accuses him of murder. His father was merely going to teach him a lesson. In the meantime, Wotan and Iman arrive at Harry's workshop for the old man's baby carriage, but he cannot do anything about the worn-out mechanism. Magne arrives there as well, and after hearing congratulations on his victory, sharply objects. He has killed a man, and he refuses to go to war. Distraught Lauritz tells the barman that the doctors have discovered a tapeworm parasite inside him, and he begins treatment. In the meantime, Gry and Fjord are eating ice cream on the porch of the barber shop, and the girl admits that her mother intends to move from Edda to the big city. Fjord decides to go with her. He's not going to attend Vidar's funeral. Turid and Magne are summoned to the school, where the boy is given permission to take his final exam and is assigned a topic: Scandinavian myths. After that, Iman tries to convince Magne to return to the battle group. After all, there is no war without casualties. Besides Vidar, there are still giants left, among them his brother. Hearing about Lauritz, Magne loses his temper, and his brother, watching the conversation from afar, sees lights sparking everywhere. Saxa takes on the firm's business with determination and one day talks to Turid, convincing her not to mix emotion and work. Satisfied, the woman thanks the girl for her understanding. Furious, Iman goes to the sports club, where she notices Harry. The girl challenges him to a fight. The guy dismisses it with a joke. Iman gives him a good kicking, but falling down and swallowing blood, the boy gets up again and again. He never gives up. Later, Iman leads him to the old man. She has found the fighter. Apparently his soul used to live in the body of Tyr, a god of war known for his courage and strength, who lost his arm in a battle with the wolf Fenrir, sacrificing himself to save his friends. Meanwhile, the youths discuss a protest against the util factories and invite Magne to participate, not noticing Saxa, who enters the cafe. The guy is uncomfortable in front of her, but he doesn't know how to stop the conversation. It is Saxa herself who does this. Magne apologizes for losing a father and the girl accepts the apology. At home, Lauritz takes his medicine and remembers Vidar bitterly. The mother tries to reconcile the brothers, and while Lauritz agrees to hug his brother, he is twisted in violent pain. The boy is taken to the hospital and the doctors are shocked to see the size of the parasite inside the man. He undergoes surgery but the worm survives. The doctors intend to examine it because they have never seen anything like it before, but Lauritz intends to keep it. That evening, Fjord and Saxa meet in a secluded spot to discuss the matter. Fjord speaks of Magne's guilt and of his intention to leave with Gry. His sister accuses him of cowardice and she leaves. The day of Vidar's funeral arrives. Magne announces that he's not going to the funeral, but his mother asks him to do so for Lauritz's sake. At this point, the boy leaves the room. He has changed his image again and now looks very much like his father. Magne runs away, unable to see his brother. He comes to the mountain and asks for his powers. He has killed the man and lost his brother. Receiving no answer, Magne goes to the church, where he is rebuked by Lauritz, who sits in the pew of the Util family. The inhabitants of Edda sing psalms, remembering Vidar, without noticing the storm that is coming upon the city. The priest reads a scripture recalling the son's duty to his father, and this is heard by Fjord, who does come to the funeral. Suddenly there is a thunderclap. Magne prays for his powers to be taken away, and Fjord goes to his father's coffin. And the moment the coffin is carried out of the altar, there is a tremendous thunderclap, and all the panes of glass fly out of the windows. Later, Gry and her mother pack up their belongings. The girl waits for Fjord, but he does not come. Instead, it's Magne who comes to say goodbye to the girl. She then goes up to Fjord's house to fetch him. But suddenly he refuses to go. There is something more precious than her. Seeing the change in his eyes, Gry runs away and asks her mother to leave quickly. The younger Util goes to the top of the mountain and pulls out the ancient Vidar world axe buried there. The monstrous serpent Midgardsorm is the spawn of Loki. Thor defeats the serpent in the last battle of Ragnarok. Magne wakens from a terrible dream. Isolde looks at him with a reproachful look. He falls down the stairs. He cannot see a thing. Turid brings him his spectacles. Magne understands what has happened. The strength has failed him. That same morning, Saxa admonishes Ren. The woman is abusing alcohol, and Ren wonders whether the girl is indifferent to Vidar's death. The girl nods in agreement. She does not feel anything. She hurries to the factory, but when she enters the floor, she finds Fjord at the desk. He has assumed the duties of the supervisor according to the statute. He exposes Saxa and removes the photo with Gry. Magne goes to Wotan, but he chases the weakling away. Neither Iman nor Harry recognize him anymore. Grieving Lauritz goes to Utilheim, where Rand demands his key back and confirms that Vidar intended to kill him. Meanwhile, Magne is preparing for the exam when Erich makes a remark. The guy puts too much emphasis on this story everyone already knows. It would be much better if you looked at those events from a modern perspective. Magne objects. If good triumphs over evil, it becomes evil itself. Erich is pleased. The moral of the myths is very interesting stuff. At this point, Iman discovers her English grades and becomes indignant. Her language skills are perfect. The grades are all wrong. The girl goes to Ran and uses her powers to get her grades corrected. Meanwhile, Turid discovers that Lauritz has some kind of monster in the aquarium which she finds disgusting. Magne learns that Iman has used her powers to change the grades. He reminds her that the powers are not for personal use. But the girl retorts, he's nobody now, and she does not care what he thinks. Turid demands that the creature be removed from the house, but she's forced to agree to her son's wish when he reminds her of the loss of his father. On his way home, Magne witnesses Harry beating up a guy who wanted to cheat and did not pay for gas. He intervenes but again receives a reminder that his opinion is no longer valued. Later he asks Lauritz to forgive him for he sincerely wanted to protect his brother. he renounced his powers and they were taken away. The brothers embrace, but Loki refuses to help in the battle. Fjord begins to run the firm's affairs with an iron fist and fires Turid for personal reasons. Upon learning this, Magne rushes to the factory and attacks Fjord, oblivious to the fact that his powers no longer exist. Utul ends up beating him and leaving him lying in the parking lot, telling him he doesn't even deserve to die. The battered lad goes to Wotan and asks for permission to rejoin the ranks of the fighters on the condition that he won't kill, but he's reminded that there is no other way of doing it. After Fjord's return, Ran takes his side, especially since Magne has lost his powers. Now the company is the first priority. Saxa is against the new policy, but nobody listens to her. Magne's new sympathizer Signy urges the guy to keep fighting Util Industries while Saxa convinces Lauritz to vote against Fjord. After all, he's a member of the family. In exchange, she offers him the key to Utilheim and money. In the evening, Lauritz comes to the Utils and Fjord has to greet his brother. Meanwhile, Magne goes for a run and sees the installation of the stone on Isolde's tomb. After dinner, Fjord inquires about Lauritz's expectations. He reminds him that Lauritz is also a giant. Fjord is willing to buy his vote, because he has much more money than Saxa does. Ran takes Lauritz home and warns him to stay away from her family. Lauritz scoffs. Even as a bastard, he is related to Vidar, while the others are not really family. The whole thing is a farce to those around them, as they are barren. Enraged, Ran follows him into the house and attacks Lauritz. Magne tries to help, but to no avail. Ran openly promises to destroy his family, for the powers have left Magne. But suddenly Turid comes home and Ran leaves. Magne decides to do what he can to win the war and returns to Wotan to regain his powers. Wotan reminds him that his greatest weapon is Mjolnir, his only chance against the giants. Magne agrees to lie to Lauritz and get the key to Utilheim. The team of warriors go to the Util's factory as Odin reminds them shortly before that they have everything they need to make the hammer, Volva's feather and Ran's arrowhead. At the mention of the dwarf's name, Halvor enters the room. All that remains is to find the eternal flame, which can only be found somewhere in the factory. Once inside, the team goes to the old warehouse, but suddenly they see guards. Wotan, Odin, is summoned to divert their attention while they forge the hammer. The old man comes out into the light and pretends he can't walk. The guards are puzzled, but remembering their orders to guard this building particularly closely, they take the old man to the gatehouse, reporting the incident to Fjord. Harry intends to break the lock on the warehouse, but Magne pulls out the key he snatched from Lauritz, lying that he intends to impress Signy by hanging a protest banner in the Util warehouse. Once inside, the team begins looking for the fire. But there is no such thing in sight. Magne reads the words of the saga and everyone understands there must be a dungeon. It must be nearby, and while Iman stays behind to keep watch, the others descend into the cellar and find the ancient forge with the eternal fire blazing. That's when Fjord arrives at the factory. And while the team is working on the hammer, Iman comes out to fight. Under the blows of the sledgehammer, the ancient iron, the feather and the tip of the giant's weapon are fused together. Meanwhile, upstairs there's a deadly battle, and Iman begins to suffer defeat. Harry asks to finish the job, and he goes up to rescue his friend. All that remains is to chop the hilt, but Halvor has never done such a thing and it comes out too short. But Magne approves of the dwarf's work, cools the finished hammer and hurries upstairs. Harry orders everyone to run and restrains Fjord himself, but the man throwing him back against the door slams it shut, amputating a part of his arm. Iman returns to help, ordering Magne to remove the hammer from the factory. The police arrive and now Halvor goes to them, diverting attention from Magne. The boy gets out of the factory and goes home, where he's greeted by his mother and brother congratulating Magne on his birthday, which he has completely forgotten about. The media reports about a break-in at the factory, a protest banner posted, and the arrest of 4 people. Magne admits that he too was part of the group, and contrary to his fears, Turid takes it calmly. Without even unpacking the presents, Magne goes to the mountain and tries to abandon Mjolnir, but the strength never returns. Magne calls Iman, the hammer doesn't work, and she tells him to do whatever it takes to succeed. He returns home, where Turid asks the boys to go get burgers. They go to a cafe where Signy approves of the action, and Lauritz tries to get the bartender's attention. At this time, there is a report on TV about the impending closure of the util factories because it has been proven that the production has polluted the environment. In addition, tax evasion has been revealed. Saxa also listens to this report. She tries to rectify the situation and asks for a press conference. Meanwhile, the director of the orphanage fires Iman and Halvor, which provokes protests from the residents. Wotan gives a fiery speech thanking the real heroes and sings the national anthem in their honor. Magne is trying to figure out what to do with Mjolnir when Turid asks her to bring Lauritz things. She's afraid to go into his room because of the horrible pet. Confused, the boy goes into the room and sees a nightmarish worm, a veritable spawn of hell. Lauritz arrives at the cafe where Iman and Harry are resting and catches the bartender in the arms of the expert. The disappointed guy walks away. Meanwhile, Fjord announces that he is moving his production to Asia where governments are more loyal to business. Turid goes to work at the store for the first time that day. Meanwhile, many residents of Edda are afraid that they might lose their jobs and homes. Lauritz, who has given up hope of finding love, feeds his worm while Magne rereads the ancient tales of Thor again and again. And suddenly it hits him. Thor was created by lightning. And then there is a news announcement on TV that the Norwegian government is backing down on closing the Utils factories as it realized that it will lead to massive job losses. Besides, the owners have promised to fix the spill. Fjord celebrates his victory while Magne is outraged. His rage electrifies the air around him. He then hears a knocking sound coming from his room. The boy rushes upstairs, sees that the window is open and the hammer is twitching. He picks up Mjolnir, and at that moment Lauritz enters the room too. Lauritz realizes that his brother lied to him. He crafted a weapon that can kill him too. Without answering, Magne goes out into the storm, extends the hammer to the sky and awakens Mjolnir, holding it in the air until lightning strikes it. His powers return. In Jotunheim, Fjord and Ran learn that Saxa has given the key to Lauritz and punish her for her treachery. After that, they leave to kill the boy. Magne goes to Jotunheim to face Fjord but finds Saxa beaten. She sees the hammer and he suddenly feels sorry for the wounded girl. But she does not tell him anything about her family's intention to kill Lauritz. Meanwhile, Lauritz is home alone and hears the enemies approach the house. Saxa tries to persuade Magne to act together while Lauritz hides in the kitchen. Ran does not notice him. Magne understands Saxa's intentions and Ran hears the sound the worm makes in the room. Thinking she has put Magne's vigilance to sleep, Saxa rushes for the hammer, but Magne is ahead of her and is ready to drop the hammer on her head. Meanwhile, Fjord catches Lauritz. In Jotunheim, a spark flashes between the young men and they grow close. Lauritz begs for mercy and declares that he alone possesses a weapon that can kill Magne. As Fjord and Ren are about to leave, Magne appears on the street and attacks them with the Mjolnir. The hammer hits the Util's car and it explodes. Magne picks up Lauritz, who is battered but still alive, and he promises to forgive his brother for deceiving him. In the morning, he carries his creepy pet to the shore of the morass and after kissing it, lets it go free. He wishes his creature to go big and strong and to avenge all his enemies. Ren and Fjord watch this from the shore. The show has had mixed reviews, from good to outright bad. But there's one thing that the viewers agree on: this story is quite compelling. The problem of today, environment, is organically integrated into the plot as one of the key elements of the story. And of course it's impossible to stay indifferent to the views of the harsh but so beautiful Scandinavian nature. Thanks to the high ratings, the show has been reviewed for a third season this year, 2023. The day comes when scientists in one of the biotechnology laboratories begin to clone famous personalities for very large fees, of course. In fact, many rich people would like to have a child of a genius like Vivaldi, Galileo, or Michelangelo. Soon, however, people decide to take a swing at something far more valuable: God himself. After Lucifer rebelled against the power of God in heaven, he was defeated by the archangel Michael, and flaming meteor was thrown into the underworld, where he had to remain in chains and punishing flames. Michael himself chained him to a rock and cried out to return as a humble angel, to which Lucifer replied that he would rather reign in hell than serve in paradise. And he threatened that he would return as ruler of the world. Over time, Lucifer was joined by numerous demons as he craved revenge. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lucifer's disciples set up a temple at the site of his fall into the abyss, and they believe that one day he will return to rule on Earth. Our time. Laura Milton, an American student, is trying to persuade her professor to accept her thesis on the theme that there are no evil or good spirits, but he refuses, offering to discuss the subject in an intimate setting. But now the girl refuses. At the same time, a rare exhibition begins at the museum, the Shroud of Turin, which contains the DNA of Jesus and is a record of the fact of his resurrection. Everything is on display. Laura enters the museum after receiving a pass, a badge from a priest she knows. Marconi explains that Christ was wrapped in the shroud the day he died, but that when he rose from the dead, his body shone so brightly that his imprint remained on the cloth. Thus, the shroud is a picture of Jesus. The priest then escorts Laura to the statue of the Archangel Michael, who has been brought to the museum to guard the shroud. The War of the Angels was the first war and the first evil, but Laura disagrees. Evil is not an external mystical force, it is a personality, and when trouble happens to loved ones, it is foolish to blame the devil. But Marconi is sure that only Michael stands between the devil and men. There are many prophecies that Lucifer will return, but the father hopes that he will not find a way out. The priest leaves to go about his business, and Laura gets comfortable and begins to draw. Suddenly, she hears her name, but no one is around. She calms down and continues to work. It's evening and the gallery is about to close. The last group of tourists enters the museum, and while the guard is distracted for a moment, a figure in a black cloak separates from the group and makes his way through a side door. Despite the late hour, Laura is still working when she thinks Lucifer's head on the statue is moving, followed by the cry of a raven. The girl walks to the window without noticing the sinister figure behind her, who pulls a sword from Michael's hand and walks away. Laura closes the window and gathers her things. The guard is ready to escort her out, but she refuses. She still has to see Padre Marconi. She goes to the chapel and sees a figure in black slaying the guard with a sword. The girl runs away in terror and hides in the confessional, watching as the woman with the sword breaks the glass over the shroud. Padre Marconi arrives at the noise and, in the name of Saint Michael, demands that the sacrilege cease, but the woman throws him aside and pierces him with her sword. Laura moves carelessly and the villain notices her. She orders her underlings to take the shroud and the girl, hoping that he might like her. The bandits leave while the mortally wounded priest summons the Archangel Michael to occupy his body and defeat his enemies. Immediately, a luminous whirlwind descends from the heavens and the father comes to life. He tries to catch up with the villains, but they drive away. The plot is moved to a private auction where one of the scientists, Dr. Laurent, explains that he has managed to create a procedure by which he can grow babies from the DNA of great men, thus resurrecting the most prominent figures in the history of mankind. And as proof, he presents the reincarnation of the great Vivaldi and his proud parents. The next lot, he presents the new Michelangelo Buonarroti, and the whole rises in a burst of delight. The bidding begins when a woman in black appears in the gallery and beckons to the doctor. He rushes to her call. The pair travel to the Devil's Castle, where the doctor sees the shroud. At last, Lucifer will have a decent home. Meanwhile, Laura is dragged into some room where several girls are already sitting in chains. All of them are horrified by what is happening and do not understand why they are there. A few men enter, take a blood test and photograph Laura, while Father Marconi, or rather the Archangel Michael in his body, makes his way to the guard room where two monks are watching the murder videos. Seeing the one who was murdered in front of them alive, they are astonished as he finds out where the keepers of the shroud were and how could they have allowed this to happen. It is explained to him that the cardinal responsible for everything is not himself at the moment. He sees secret cults and the devil's minions. And now he is in the asylum of Saint Michael. Archangel takes the car keys and drives to the cardinal's house, while the doctor isolates DNA from the blood traces on the shroud. The old cardinal meets Michael with a gun and, upon learning of what has happened, becomes enraged. He warned them, but looking into the man's eyes, he realizes he is not Marconi. The cardinal shows Michael Lucifer's castle and suggests that his minions intend to revive him. He reminds him the scriptures say that one day the devil will be freed from his chains and will rise from the underworld. Apparently the time has come. Two monsters are responsible for his release, a woman and an underground monster, but only Michael himself or God can set Lucifer free. The devil's minions have offered him the bodies of virgins for centuries to get a vessel for the devil, but human bodies are too weak. Although there was one woman in history who was able to bear and give birth to a son of God, and today science is ready to open the gates to the devil using Christ's DNA. Michael asks to be taken to the castle. Meanwhile, the girls try to devise an escape plan and share their experiences. It turns out that Laura's husband and son are dead. Instruments inform the doctor of a successful DNA extraction, and the walls in the underworld begin to crumble, heralding the devil's release, while the doctor informs Liz of a complete match of all the right parameters with Laura's body, and the women wait for the attendants to arrive and pounce on them. It seems that they will succeed, but another group rushes to the rescue and the girls are dragged into the laboratory. They are laid on tables, and despite desperate resistance, fertilized eggs are injected into their bodies. Liz convinces Laura to put up with it, for Lucifer is bound to like her. In the meantime, Cardinal escorts Michael to the entrance to the dungeon and warns of caution. A monster awaits ahead. At this time, the devil's minions gather in the hall with the well. Two impregnated girls are tied to a pillar in the center, and the monster who has come out takes them and leads them to the gateway to the underworld. The girls are put in an iron cage and lowered down, while Lucifer is already waiting for them. Sensing the approach of the possible Holy Mothers, he removes their collars and, transformed into a luminous stream, rushes towards them. The women are seized by the subterranean monsters and the stream enters one of them, but her body fails and she dies. Then the glowing worm enters Laura's body. Liz and the servants greet the living woman with delight. The choice is made. She is escorted into a glass cage where it is explained that her child will be the new Jesus. Meanwhile, Michael sneaks inside the castle and, having obtained a guard's uniform, finds the shroud and tries to find Laura. The doctor enters, but Michael rejects him and sets fire to the laboratory. He finds Laura, but the woman realizes it is not her longtime friend. She runs away. The Archangel has to run after her. He manages to drag her into a storage room where he explains who he is and finds out exactly what was being done to the woman. The couple escapes when Liz is informed that the shroud is missing. She gives an order to detain Laura at all costs, and the guards rush in after her. Laura and Michael in the meantime try to hide from the underground monster in narrow passages, but it catches up with them and attacks the Archangel. And while he wages a hard fight, Laura is grabbed by the guards. The enraged woman threatens Liz to kill herself and the child, and she orders her to be taken to a cell. Meanwhile, Michael is captured and put on a chain in the dungeon while Laura is tied to a bed. Liz is willing to do anything to keep the baby. After gathering all his strength, Michael breaks the chains and frees himself, while the castle guards search for the shroud hidden in the dungeon. The monster manages to see the Archangel descend into the underworld. After reaching the bottom, he's attacked by the imprisoned souls and discovers that Lucifer has been freed and his sword is missing. Then the demon of greed, Mammon, flies to him and announces that they will soon close the gate and Michael will remain here instead of Lucifer, and he scoffs at his foolishness to come down in a mortal body. The Archangel is chained to the rock with Lucifer's sword. Laura meanwhile sees her child in an ultrasound, and he suddenly calls out her name. The woman wakes up terrified and sees Liz nearby, who finds out what Lucifer told her, and then tells the story of a brave warrior and a tyrant who were equals. But the tyrant wanted the warrior to be his slave, but he refused, and soon he would rise up and join the fight. Laura speaks unflatteringly of the demon, for which she is slapped in the face. After which Liz explains the transformation happening to her body by the need to make it comfortable for the divine child. But the woman doesn't want to accept her imposed role as the mother of an incomprehensible creature. Meanwhile, the people who were given to Lucifer come to Michael, pronouncing the oath, "Saved one, saved all," and questioning him about his origins. Discovering that it is Michael himself, they demand proof, but Michael needs a sword. At this point, they are attacked by demons. The men flee. Laura is again visited by the worm Lucifer, who goes inside her. He speaks to her and convinces her to give birth to the baby he wants, after which she can do what she wants, even kill Liz. The woman calms down and sees herself with the baby in her arms. But one day she frees herself and terribly mutilates the guards and escapes from the ward. When she sees the consequences of her actions, she is horrified. What has been done to her? She manages to make her way to a warehouse, and after locking herself inside, she drinks a canister of chlorine. Liz finds it and promises that soon Lucifer will consume her completely and then she will find peace. But then Laura suddenly gains unprecedented strength, grabs the hated Liz and spews the contents of her stomach on her. From Laura's womb, Lucifer himself begins to speak to Liz and demands that the woman be killed as soon as he is born, and to destroy all who knows of what is happening. Laura is imprisoned in a glass sarcophagus to prevent any further attempts to kill the child, and Lucifer returns to the underworld where he sees Michael and taunts him. He offers an alliance that no one will be able to defeat, but the archangel refuses to support the rebel. He thanks Michael for his new home, the body of Jesus himself, which will be his own. Lucifer flies away, and the archangel suddenly realizes this is not at all what he thought. It is not the devil but God who has chosen Laura. She will give birth to Christ, not the devil's vessel. He asks the people to bring his sword, but the demons are close and the sword is heavy. But two men risk their lives to bring the weapon and Michael is set free. He dispels the demons and promises to return for his saviors. Michael returns to Earth and finds the shroud. Then he goes to Laura's sarcophagus. He is horrified to see her change and tries to tell her that this child is not evil at all. It is he who will defeat the devil. But Laura gets out and throws Michael away. Then she stands over him and tells him that the waters are already breaking. Searing jets pour out on the archangel and he screams in pain. Losing his strength, Laura places Michael in her lap and demands that he kneel. He refuses and the woman sinks her fingers into his neck. With the last of his strength, Michael promises that the devil will not be able to control the child. He is the one who will defeat Lucifer because the blood of Christ does not flow and good is always stronger than evil. Enraged, Laura throws Michael aside and begins to destroy everything around her. But then the birth begins. The devil's followers gather in the castle courtyard while Liz takes the born baby away. Laura is thrown down the well and the monster takes a chain with a sharp tip and goes into the courtyard. Liz brings the baby out and shows it to the assembled people. The end of God's tyranny has come. She orders the people to kneel and calls upon Lucifer to receive the baptism of blood. At the same moment, the monster begins to spin his terrible weapon, crushing everyone in the courtyard. At this time, Michael comes to his senses and goes out into the yard as the doctor kisses the baby and dies under the blows. Liz carries the baby away, and Michael finds Laura, who has managed to hold onto the edge of the well, and pulls her out. The pair catch up with Liz's car, and while Laura picks up her baby, Michael calls him the God who chose his mother. He asks the woman to find the cardinal and goes to the well himself. He seals the entrance to the underworld where all the demons of hell have rushed, but the monster rejects him and opens the gates again. And then Michael detonates the explosives he set earlier. The castle explodes to the great joy of the cardinal. A bit later, the cardinal and Laura with the child in her arms come to the temple and return the shroud. And Michael descends into the underworld and frees the people who believed in him. After a while, Liz observes Cardinal and Laura with a grown boy walking through the woods, and she calls the baby Lucifer. And he turns around and shows a dark jet showing out of his nose. Then he turns away. Pretty unusual film which raises the themes of the struggle between good and evil but viewed through the prism of the scientific achievements of our time. And some doubts arise as to whether man truly understands what he is really doing. After a young priest arrives on an isolated island, supernatural events, incredible miracles, and frightening omens begin to occur. And it turns out that all of this is caused by the blood of an angel, which turns people who drink it into demons. Riley Flynn looks in horror at the girl hit by his car. The man realizes he is guilty because he was drunk, but there is nothing he can do about it. Later, the man freely admits his guilt and goes to prison, where every night before going to sleep he sees the girl he killed. 4 years have passed. Riley's mother, Annie, eagerly awaits his son's arrival in his homeland, a fishing village on Crockett Island off the coast of Washington state, and raises her youngest son, Warren, forbidding him to go to the peat bogs. But the boy wouldn't listen to her lecturing, and having met his friends, he goes to the forbidden place because no one will prevent the young people there from trying illegal substances and having a great time. They buy the stuff from a local dealer and go to the peat bogs. On the way, the guys stop at the house where Lisa lives. The girl cannot walk. She refuses the offered treat, and the trio goes on their way. At this time, a young man with a huge box locked with padlocks enters the door of the local priest's house. The boys get into a boat and make their way to the far shore of the island. It's already dark, so when they hear a sound of huge wings, the boys mistake them for a giant heron taking off. The peat bogs are also teeming with stray cats that were brought here from the mainland, and they feed on old remains because up until the 1920s people buried their dead right in the yards. And now when the peat bogs get flooded, those remains resurface. Warren knows this because after storms all this creepiness washes ashore where their house stands. The boys settle in their usual spot and after taking some revelatory substances start telling tales about local ghosts. At that moment, loud cat cries are heard from the bushes, and Warren, shining his flashlight in that direction, sees two burning eyes following them. But they immediately disappear, and the boy forgets about the incident. In the morning, Riley arrives on the island. Annie meets her son and apologizes for his father and younger brother who could not meet him because they were out fishing. Meanwhile, the ferry is met by a zealous parishioner, Bev Keane, who is concerned about the long absence of Father Pruitt. But the priest is not on the ferry. Meanwhile, teacher Erin Grin undergoes an ultrasound examination of the unborn child and the doctor assures her that there is nothing wrong with the baby. The women pay attention to Riley, from which they are distracted by the appearance of the doctor's elderly mother who suffers from dementia. Annie introduces her son to the new sheriff and the latter greets the boy. The sheriff then wakes up the only detainee, local alcoholic Joe, who came running in the night screaming that a huge albatross was chasing him. The sheriff releases sobered up Joe and he walks out to his dog who has been waiting for his master at the exit all night. Bev, who is passing by, is indignant. The dog is dangerous, it could attack, but they don't listen to her. Meanwhile, Riley and Annie reach their house. The woman shares her problems. There has been an oil spill accident and now fishermen can only catch fish according to their quota. Naturally, this causes money problems. Previously, hundreds of families lived on the island, but now there are only dozens left. In the meantime, there is a meeting at the school because a storm is coming to the island very soon and it is necessary to make sure the shelter is ready. The new sheriff calls for it to be equipped in the school, but Bev objects. Everything has been ready in the church for a long time and there is no need to change anything. All members of the Flynn family finally get together for dinner. Riley informs them that he has to travel to the mainland to check in with the Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one of the conditions for his release. Warren talks about the new teacher, a daughter of an ex. Riley perks up. Is Erin really back on the island? And learns of her pregnancy. Annie announces that their old priest, Father Pruitt, has made the trip to the Holy Land, despite his age-related problems. Warren serves as an altar boy and is aware of the pastor's forgetfulness. Riley disappoints his parents. He has no intention of going to church, which incurs the wrath of his father, a devout Catholic. Meanwhile, Bev notices a light in the windows of Pruitt's house and upon entering stares in surprise at the man who meets her. And in the shoreline thickets, attacks on the cats begin to occur. Before going to bed, the father tells Riley that after what happened to him, Annie goes to church every day and prays for him. He asks the boy to at least sit in the pew for it is very important to his mother. At this time, the new sheriff and his son perform namaz before going to bed. The doctor catches the mother trying to climb to the second floor, and Riley sees Warren climb out the window to go to his friends. At night, Riley as usual sees recurrent dreams of the dead girl and of himself sitting in the boat. The dawn is breaking. The altar workers are preparing for the upcoming church service and notice that the wine bowls are already full. The congregation takes their seats. Bev opens the service, people sing hymns while the new priest enters the room. Paul Hill has been sent to replace Father Pruitt, who has left and is hospitalized on the mainland. Paul conducts the service and administers communion to the faithful except for Riley, who has refused to do so. The new priest calls all the parishioners by name, explaining this by Pruitt's stories. Riley decides to accompany Erin, and the young people reminisce about their past encounters and talk about their experiences. They both vowed not to go back, but nevertheless they are on the island again. Riley lost everything after the accident and Erin is separated from her husband. The man admits that he read all about different religions while he was in prison because he hoped to find God but ended up being an atheist. And here he is of no use to anyone and doesn't know how to move on. In the evening, the storm comes to the island and Riley sees what looks like Father Pruitt walking along the beach. But when he goes out to look, he finds no one. And in the morning, people find hundreds of dead cats on the beach. The citizens cannot determine the cause of death of these animals, although the sheriff suggests some kind of disease, until he discovers that there is not a drop of blood in their bodies. Riley admits to seeing Monsignor Pruitt at night, but nobody believes him. Later, the man travels to the mainland while Father Paul holds a service, but the church is almost empty. Of the regular parishioners, there's only Lisa, the mayor's paralyzed daughter. The priest gives her communion, then walks her home and learns that the girl's mutilation is the result of an accidental shooting by drunk Joe. In the meantime, Erin catches Bev in the storeroom, from where the woman takes a box of poison intending to poison the rats, which have become too numerous. And Father Paul comes to Dr. Sarah's house to administer communion to her sick mother. The elderly woman calls him by the name of Pruitt, which her daughter believes is a symptom of the developing dementia. Back on the island, Riley speaks to Erin. It becomes clear that the two were romantically involved in their early youth. And Annie suddenly notices that her eyesight has improved considerably. In the morning, Father Paul meets his flock at Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Easter Lent. He gives an inspiring speech about the rebirth of the island and the first disciples of Christ, the fishermen. And he reminds them, man must remember that he is dust, and to dust he shall return. After the blessing, the residents gather for the feast. Riley speaks to the priest and again recalls Father Pruitt. He is convinced his eyes did not betray him that night. It was Father Pruitt. Father Paul suggests starting an Alcoholics Anonymous group on the island so that Riley doesn't have to travel so far, especially since there are others here suffering from this evil. The fun is interrupted by an unpleasant incident. Joe's dog dies after eating food off the ground. A new morning arrives. Riley goes out fishing with his father because the father has a bad back. Meanwhile, the sheriff goes to the school pantry where Bev confesses that she left poison in some parts of the island and the dog really could have died from it. But it was unintentional and anyone could have taken the poison. In the evening, Riley visits Father Paul and reveals that Bev has extorted donations for the church from the parishioners after convincing them to accept an agreement with the oil company that poisoned the waters of the bay and to receive generous compensation. And it's the same story everywhere else in the world. Villages are getting poorer and churches are getting more luxurious. The father reminds Riley that he was once a believer, and the boy expresses his contempt for the doctrine of good deity because the idea that suffering leads to purification is appalling. At night, Erin sees a mysterious creature near her house and noticing the bloody discharge rushes to the doctor. But Sarah reassures the woman there is nothing wrong with her baby. Later, she has to convince the frightened mother that she just imagined a face in the window. Meanwhile, the dealer passing by an empty house hears strange noises inside. He walks through the door and is attacked. It is morning and Father Paul, for some reason, takes a particularly close look at Lisa. Then he insists that the girl get up from her chair and come up for communion. And to everyone's shock, Lisa gets up and walks up to the priest. At night, Father Paul enters the confessional and tells himself that he is lying to the parishioners. After all, Father Pruitt was sicker than they thought, and having gone to the Holy Land, the man often fell behind the group. But the parishioners don't need to know that. They will believe that their shepherd is being healed on the mainland and will soon return to the island to witness the miracles that are happening. For after Lisa's recovery, which is perceived by the residents as a miracle, a religious revival begins on Crockett Island. Except that Father Paul himself becomes sick and vomits blood after the accomplishment, which Bev sees. And then the woman notices a newspaper clipping with Father Pruitt's portrait hanging on the wall of the priest's house. The doctor examines Lisa and cannot understand the miracle that has occurred, but her parents strongly oppose her examination on the mainland. And later, the woman finds her mother on the second floor of the house, to which she climbed on her own, although she has not been able to walk for a long time. Meanwhile, suffering people begin to converge on the church, which pleases Bev immensely but displeases Father Paul. He doesn't need the publicity, especially since many, including Riley, think it's a misdiagnosis by doctors. But that same evening, a miracle happens to his father. The man suddenly stops having back pain and even asks his wife to dance. At this time, Lisa summons Warren and the couple runs off to have fun, and Riley goes to Erin. More and more parishioners come to the morning mass. And one day, Warren catches Father Paul pouring some kind of liquid into the wine, and during the sermon, the priest suddenly collapses without feeling. The story shifts to the time of Father Paul's confession, in which he tells the true story of Monsignor Pruitt. After a visit to Jerusalem near Damascus, he was caught in a sandstorm and took refuge in ancient ruins. This is where Father Paul comes to his senses. He is examined by Sarah, though the man is against any intervention. Meanwhile, the sheriff finds a Bible in his son Ali's possession, and Lisa visits Joe and confesses that she hated him for years for stealing her future, but eventually forgives him. That same day at the school assembly, the sheriff tries unsuccessfully to convince Bev to stop handing out the Bibles to public school students. Later, Erin confesses that she's intimidated by Bev's confidence in her rightness, and Riley shares with her Father Paul's assignment to write penitential letters to loved ones. That same evening, Sarah's mother begins to speak quite sensibly, much to the doctor's surprise. And touched by Lisa's forgiveness, Joe decides to attend the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting with Riley and Father Paul because he intends to change his life. The men go home and Joe confesses that he recently buried his sister on the mainland. That same evening, Ali asks for his father's permission to attend the mass. The kid is interested in everything that happens in the church, but the sheriff is against it. They are Muslims. Ali reminds him it's his father's decision, not his. But the father recalls how his dying wife praised Allah until the very last moment. God cannot decide who gets a miracle and who does not. The sheriff turns off the light and jumps away from the window because behind it is a pale face, but the next moment there is nothing. In the meantime, Father Paul collapses in front of Bev and the congregation and dies coughing up blood. The action carries over to the moment when Pruitt takes refuge in the dark cave. He burns matches, trying to make out the room where he is trapped, and suddenly sees two burning eyes. Then he is attacked by a nightmarish creature that sucks his blood and drinks his own blood in return. The priest concludes that it is an angel because when he wakes up in the morning, Pruitt finds that he is young again. So he decided to take his savior with him. He rode ahead, waiting for the angel to catch up with him. And he was very much afraid that the angel would disappear. Here on the island, he hid it from everyone and lied to the parishioners because he was Father Pruitt. The next moment, the priest comes back to life. During a scheduled checkup, the doctor informs Erin that her uterus is empty. It was probably a miscarriage. The woman is shocked. How could she not have noticed it at such a late stage? Meanwhile, Bev cancels the mass and her assistant notices the incredible resemblance between Father Paul and Monsignor Pruitt. She is convinced of the miracle and the others are simply frightened. Bev enters the priest's room and discovers that he cannot stand the light. It is also as if he can feel God inside him. Bev persuades him to manifest the miracle to his new apostles. Riley notices an improvement in his father's well-being, and the father confesses his unjust anger towards his son and asks for forgiveness for his omissions. Meanwhile, Sarah is collecting Erin's tests when her mother enters the office. She answers her daughter's questions confidently and looks much better than before. And then Sarah sees the blood in the test tube begin to boil in the sun and burn to the ground. In the meantime, distraught, Erin spends the day with Riley, mourning her unborn child and discussing their childhood. She resents her mother, who was a real dictator and never loved her daughter. And then she managed to marry her mother's mental double, which only her pregnancy saved her from. She just packed up and left. Then Riley recounts his dream. At this time, Father Paul is reciting prayers, which makes him sick, and then he notices the mark of the cross on his hand. He cuts his hand and drinks his blood. Joe tries to talk himself out of buying alcohol and he succeeds with great difficulty. At night, Father Paul holds an evening communion at the house of the doctor's elderly mother, Mildred, who recognizes him as Monsignor Pruitt. Meanwhile, Riley and Erin talk about their ideas of the afterlife and the basics of religion, after which they feel better. That same evening, Joe stops by Father Paul's house and witnesses Father Paul drinking communion wine. Joe looks at the portrait of Pruitt on the wall. Father Paul looks very much like him. The priest embraces Joe, who pulls away, falls, and smashes his head. Seeing the blood, the priest loses his mind and takes to drinking it. In the morning, Riley explains that his dream has changed. Erin has appeared in it, and the woman is sent to the mainland to another doctor. Meanwhile, Bev discovers Joe's dead body and exhausted Father Paul. She asks the mayor's wife to sing hymns, and she herself orders a couple of parishioners to dispose of the corpse. Bev believes that the priest's actions are justified and that his resurrection is a foreshadowing of Christ's second coming. At this time, Erin hears an expert opinion of the doctor, who doubts that the pregnancy was real. By evening, Father Paul feels good again. He holds an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting explaining Joe's absence by his trip to see his sister, but Riley knows that this is not true and leaves the meeting confused. When he arrives home, he tells his mother about the priest's lies. At night, Father Paul is visited by Angel, who begins to fill the goblet with his blood, while Riley, determined to deal with it, returns to the recreation center. He opens the doors and is attacked by Angel. In the morning, Sarah's mother impresses her daughter with her blooming appearance, and the sheriff is approached by the mother of the missing dealer, who asks him to track down her son. Meanwhile, the parishioners are informed that the Mass has been postponed until midnight due to Father Paul's illness, and the startled people view Mildred, who is considerably younger. Erin, concerned about Riley's sudden disappearance, files a missing persons report with the sheriff, but the latter suggests that Riley may have gone on a bench or committed suicide. At Good Friday Mass, Father Paul delivers a sermon replete with militaristic rhetoric, urging the congregation to prepare for war as soldiers in the Lord's army. This sermon upsets Mildred, who forbids her daughter to attend the church any further. At night, Erin is visited by Riley, who asks her to go in a boat with him. The woman agrees, even though she suspects something is amiss. After sailing far from the island, Riley recounts what has happened to him. After Angel's attack, he quickly recovered under Father Paul's care. When Riley tried to go outside, he was burnt and was forced to return and listen to the revelations of Father Paul. The priest is convinced that the angel's blood is a gift from God, and he mixes it into his communion wine to cure the people of Crockett Island of all illnesses. The priest also admitted that he had killed Joe, but according to him, the murder was justified. He also believes that the vampirism traits they both display are the grace of God, which Bev fully agrees with. Father Paul demonstrated to the boy his desire for blood as food, but reassured him that this would soon pass. Nevertheless, Riley is not ready to acknowledge what has happened as divine providence, while the priest reminds him of the fear of all who have seen miracles. Meanwhile, Bev brings Riley the goblet of the congregation's blood, and he drinks it. The priest releases Riley without listening to Bev's objections, for the man's rebirth is complete. Outside, Riley notices how his perception has changed. The colors are brighter and the air more saturated, and he witnesses a conversation between Mildred and his daughter. He visits his sleeping family before heading over to Erin's. Then they head out to sea, where he has nowhere to go. Riley confesses his love for Erin and asks the woman to flee the island. She reciprocates, but at this moment the dawn breaks. Riley sees in the boat the girl he killed in the accident. She smiles and takes his hand. Riley ignites and burns, turning to ash, and Erin screams in terror. The relatives find Riley's letters, while Erin returns to the island and tells Sarah about what is happening in the city. The doctor shows how her blood samples are vaporized by the sunlight and shows rejuvenated Mildred. At this time, Paul confesses to Bev that he senses Riley's death, but the woman reassures him that the boy, having received a great gift, has chosen his own path. She reminds him of Judah, who is also part of God's plan. Sarah shares with Erin and Mildred her theory that Father Paul is spreading a miracle-creating virus through communion wine. This would also explain the missing pregnancy. After all, it is a foreign element in the body which the virus has decided to deal with dramatically. At this time, Ben brings his son's letters to Father Paul. He senses that something bad has happened. One of the letters is addressed to his father, and Ben asks him to give it to the Monsignor. After Ben leaves, Paul opens the letter and receives a quote, a reminder that they are all ashes, and to dust they shall return. And Erin tries to tell Annie about Riley's death, but the angry woman throws her out, not wanting to believe the terrible news. Sarah informs the sheriff of her suspicions about what is happening in the church, but he refuses to take any action, not wanting to further aggravate relations with the locals, especially since he has already encountered unfair and prejudicial treatment. Erin, Sarah, and Mildred decide to move to the mainland, but find that the mayor has sent the ferries away for repairs, and the fishing boats are almost all in need of repairs. During the night, the power and mobile network go out, which are also shut down by Bev's handmaidens. Erin decides to go to the Mass to see the danger for herself. Meanwhile, the sheriff allows his son to attend the midnight Mass, and he asks his father to go with him. Before the Mass begins, the townspeople make a procession around the island with candles and hymn singing. The service begins with Father Paul confessing to our lie. Then he confesses that he is Monsignor Pruitt. And today is the beginning of a new era for all of them because holy blood flows in their veins. He calls a parishioner and asks him to drink poison, to die and be reborn. The man drinks it and drops dead. When some people see this, they rush to the exit, but the angel in shining garb stands in the doorway. The creature reaches the dais and spreads his wings to the astonished gaps of the people, and then the dead man comes to life and gets to his feet. Bev and her assistants bring out cups of poison and hand them out to everyone present. The sheriff tries to take Ali away, but the boy pulls out his hand. He wants to stay with God. That is when the policeman pulls out his gun, but the congregation rushes at him and throws him to the floor. The boy, in spite of his father's screams, drinks the poison. Lisa's parents do the same, but the girl refuses. Unimaginable things are happening all around. Some are drinking the poison, the others are pushing the cups away. Then Mildred raises the sheriff's gun and shoots Father Paul in the head. A vampire attacks her and carries her away in his claws from the church. Bev orders the doors to be locked. Meanwhile, Ali comes back to life. The dead parishioners are resurrected as vampires and, hungry, attack those who have not drunk the poison. All hell breaks loose with screams and blood everywhere. Ed turns into a vampire and Sheriff Aaron, Lisa, Sarah, Warren and Annie flee. But Bev gets in their way. Aaron shoots her, after which the group escapes. Father Paul regains consciousness while resurrected Bev and her assistants send vampires to attack the townspeople who are not present at the church. After the parishioners turned vampires have left the church, Father Paul is resurrected and, disappointed by the outcome of the mass, removes his robes and remains sitting alone on the steps of the altar of the bloody church, looking at Mildred, who has also turned. Screams can be heard in the town. The vampires are killing their loved ones and converting them. Meanwhile, the group of the runaways hide out in Aaron's house, pondering over a future plan of action. Warren recalls his canoe, which is hidden on the outskirts of the island, and Aaron realizes that the vampires needed the boats for something. She becomes terrified at the thought that some of the monsters might make it to the mainland. Suddenly, a burning bottle flies in through the window, setting the house on fire. It is Bev. She wants to settle the score with Aaron, who shot her. To allow the group to escape, Annie distracts the attackers by exposing Bev's motives. She is just jealous that God loves everyone without singling her out. Bev, who is always so right and so good, must be furious. Then Annie commits suicide by seducing the vampires with her blood. Meanwhile, John Pruitt recalls his affair with Mildred, which resulted in the birth of Sarah, who was forced to live with her fake father, as such circumstances were unacceptable for the pastor. The priest admits that the main reason for bringing Angel to the island was his desire to cure Mildred and live in peace with her and his daughter as a full family. The survivors decide to split up. The adults go to burn the boats prepared by the vampires to leave for the mainland to spread vampirism, while Lisa and Warren flee toward the peat bogs, where the younger Flynn's canoe is stored. Along the way, they encounter other vampires more than once, attacking innocent people who have not attended the midnight mass. Drunk on blood, Bev proposes not to extinguish the house, but instead to burn every building on the island, following the biblical story of the end of the world and the Ark, which will be the building of the rehabilitation center. She and her assistant go to burn the city, unaware that some converts who have not lost their reason and morals refuse to kill. Among them are Riley's parents, who find each other in the middle of the night. The sheriff, Aaron, and Sarah meanwhile set fire to the boats, and Lisa and Warren hide in an abandoned house, unaware that they have entered the lair of the beast. The girl lights a match and sees the angel drinking blood of the man dragged into the house. Lisa shoots the monster, but he's so engrossed in what he's doing that he doesn't even notice them. Then Lisa douses the room with fuel, and walking out the door they set fire to the house, but the angel breaks free and flies off into the night. At this time, Bev has already prepared a center for the converts to wait out the dawn and calls them out with the sound of a bell. She quotes statements about the Ark, but Pruitt abandons her idea and is unwilling to be the leader of the converts. Bev reports that the boats are burned, while Lisa and Warren mentally say goodbye to their families and get into their canoe. Bev takes command and throws the atheist convert out of the Ark, mocking his desire to save himself with the believers. Monsignor, on the other hand, invites the man to stay in the church, for God loves everyone regardless of their views, because everyone is worthy of salvation. But once inside the church, John sees Sarah, who is going to burn everything with kerosene and a lighter. He confesses that he's her father and regrets that he didn't get to know her better. But at that moment one of Bev's underlings shoots Sarah. Enraged, Pruitt attacks him, wanting to kill him, but stops himself in time, remembering who he is and where he is. John tries to save Sarah and lets her drink his blood to turn her into a vampire, but she spits it back out, wanting to die human. John and Mildred mourn their daughter's death. They take her body, burn the church, and leave for the bridge by the river, a memorable place where Sarah often played as a child. Meanwhile, the walls of the rehab center are doused with kerosene by the surviving sheriff. Bev mocks the sheriff's religion and shoots him, and Erin emerges from the building, spilling kerosene inside, but is picked up by a flying vampire, taking her aside and gnawing at her neck. But then Ali picks up the lighter and throws it into the building. Bev takes another shot at the sheriff, but his son rushes to the man and takes him away. Realizing that there are no more places to wait out the dawn, the converts disperse, wanting to spend their last moments with their loved ones. Slowly dying, Erin shreds the wings of the blood-sucking vampire with a knife, after which the vampire struggles to rise into the air. He is spotted by Lisa and Warren, who are watching the shore from the boat, and they note the monster's slow speed and that he's unlikely to make it to the mainland before dawn. Erin dies looking up at the stars and remembering Riley. Bev leaves to meet the dawn on the beach. The wounded sheriff and his son also go to the shore, where together they begin to pray, adhering to their native religion. Monsignor Pruitt and Mildred sit on the bridge holding Sarah's body. The father renounces the church and begs his beloved for forgiveness. Finally, dawn breaks. Ali burns in the sunlight, sitting by his father's dead body. Desperate, Bev tries to dig a shelter in the sand and burns up in hysterics. Riley's parents, in a crowd of similarly converted people, greet the dawn by singing hymns praising the Lord. All the islanders burn while Pruitt and Mildred kiss against the rising sun. The only survivors, Lisa and Warren, watch the fire. Suddenly, the girl confesses that she can no longer feel her legs. And that's the end of the series. Write in the comments what you think of this series. The film takes place in the small town of Vengenberg, where a young girl named Yennefer lives with a skewed face and a disgusting hump in the family of a cowman. Because of her ugly appearance, the girl is constantly mocked by the locals, and one day when Yennefer is once again mocked by a couple of local young men, the girl accidentally opens a portal to the magical Tor Lara in Aretuza, where she's met by the young wizard Istrid. The guy's concerned. All magic leaves traces, which wizards can use to find someone who has even an ounce of magic in them. He decides to save the budding sorceress and opens a safe portal that brings Yennefer home. Time later, a beautiful and wealthy lady arrives at the farm of the girl's father to buy a pig. But upon seeing the girl, she expresses a desire to buy her too. And the father, who does not hide his disgust for his daughter, sells her for half the price of the animal, despite the pleas of her mother, who recognizes the lady as a witch. So Yennefer finds herself in the magical school of the enchantress Tissaia of Rees, where several girls are already studying. At first, Yennefer takes the separation from home hard, and how low her father judged her. She even tried to commit suicide, but when classes begin, she discovers that the young wizard was right. It was her inadvertent wizardry that caused the wave and caught the attention of the school's rector, the wizardess Tissaia. The girls who study at the school have also distinguished themselves with the same unique skills. Soon Tissaia holds the first test. The girls must lift a stone and a flower without touching them, and using a spell. Everyone more or less manages to cope with the task, but Yennefer fails. The girl stubbornly tries again and again until Tissaia stops her. Frustrated, Yennefer runs away. Later, she finds Istrid in the cave and tells him her name. Sometime later, Tissaia trains her female pupils to recognize man's greatest fear. She sees the girls in pairs and orders them to look into each other's eyes until they get inside their rival schemes. Yennefer pairs up to encourage the girl, but she again fails. Tissaia is enraged. Yennefer is useless. And this is because she's lying to herself. Even if she were a beauty, no one would love her. Although she's not the only one to whom she has problems, Yennefer shares the problems with her only friend, Istrid, who talks about her schooling. He too was having a hard time with everything. The boy offers to read his mind, and the girl succeeds. One night, Tissaia wakes the girls in the middle of a storm and takes them to the Tor Lara, the most powerful magic place in the continent, entrance to which is only open to members of the Wizard Brotherhood. Today there will be a test in the art of controlling the flows of chaos, which requires catching lightning in a bottle. The girls do not believe in such a possibility, and some get strong discharges even after catching the lightning. Yennefer's turn comes, and she reaches up with the bottle, but it is thrown back against the wall. Enraged, she directs her power at her more fortunate opponent, Tissaia, blocking her mental blow. Later, she reprimands her apprentice she almost killed today, which means that her emotions can ruin her own. Tissaia cannot be sure that Yennefer will not go along with her feelings and harm his school, for she's to become a court sorceress, and the weak have no place near a ruler. The enchantress already doubts that there's anything in her that the wizarding chapter needs. Frustrated, Yennefer tells Istrid everything. But most importantly, the enchantress knows all about them and they won't be able to see each other again. The guy is willing to show her other, more ancient and powerful magic, but it is very dangerous. He shows her the skulls of the dead elves who built Aretuza. They were the first wizards of the continent, and they were the ones who built all the magical places. But humans came to the continent and slaughtered them. Istrid gives her a flower that can only grow where the elder blood rests and reads a spell, which by repeating it the girl opens a portal. The astonished wizard does not understand how she managed to do it the first time, and Yennefer confesses that her real father was a half-elf who died in the purge. It was his blood that made her ugly. The boy kisses Yennefer and confesses his love. Later, she shows Tissaia the flower. It turns out that this was her assignment, to get the plant by applying the skills of false emotion. Yennefer hopes to be elevated. The enchantress promises that she will soon hear a knock and know when it is time. Meanwhile, Istrid is also reporting to his mentor Strigobor about what he has learned about the girl. One night, Yennefer hears a knock at her neighbor's door and, taking the flower, goes after them. She peeks out as Tissaia turns the four of them into eels. The enchantress knows the girl is here and orders her to come out and push her former fellow students into the water. They are now the conduits of magic for Aretuza. Yennefer performs this and then sees many silhouettes of former schoolmates in the water. Time passes. Yennefer enjoys a love affair with Istrid, applying what she has learned to enhance the effect of intimacy. Thus, one day she created a whole crowd that watched her intimacy and then rewarded the lovers with applause. The guy is amazed at her imagination. What will she come up with next time? So the day of the final rite is approaching, after which they will be masters of their own destiny. Yennefer dreams of graduating from Aretuza and returning to her native Aedirn as a powerful sorceress to show her longtime abusers and her father what she's been able to achieve. In addition, all Aretuza graduates are perfected before being sent to the different kingdoms. All physical defects are removed, which awaits Yennefer as well. The wizard in charge shows her his work, the flawless beauty of the graduates, and promises her an equally wonderful result. He suggests making her color a noble but strong gray. Tissaia, on the other hand, teaches her to look in the mirror and see what Yennefer herself wants. She orders the girl to close her eyes and imagine the most powerful woman in the world. Yennefer complies with the order but does not yet see the promised beauty. Meanwhile, the chapter of wizards gathers in Aretuza to decide where their graduates should go, for all kings need court wizards. Then it transpires that one of the leaders of the council, the wizard Strigobor, knows that Yennefer is a quarter elf, which means that she will not be accepted at Aretuza, where there is a prejudice against elves. The chapter vows to send Yennefer to Nilfgaard, which the aspiring enchanter does not like. She demands an audience with the chapter, but Tissaia declares herself in charge of the distribution. Yennefer is beside herself. She has no intention of wasting her life serving the king of a small southern kingdom and a lover of women. The tutor reminds her of the elven blood, and the girl understands how Strigobor knew about it. The initiation ceremony begins, which Yennefer does not attend. Worried, Istrid finds her behind a letter to her father asking him to confirm that she's his own daughter. The boy does not believe that this letter can convince the chapter. But the girl simply does not know what to do, for even if Istrid disproves his words about her origins, no one will believe him anymore. The enchanter is frustrated. He didn't know why Strigobor needed this information, and she has already missed all the initiation spells. Istrid suggests that she should go with him, for he has been offered to become an explorer. They can travel the continent and discover the unknowable. But unexpectedly, the girl cruelly ridicules his plan. She's not going to dig through the dust of the ages at all, and these are his dreams and intentions, and her opinion, as always, he does not even ask. Istrid is shocked. Yennefer is not at all what he thought she was, and he expresses his opinion that she's angry because she missed her chance to find beauty. But a girl needs power. And she didn't experience so much hardship studying at the magic school for nothing. Yennefer runs to the enchanter who is in charge of perfection and demands to show her art. Not even the lack of a potion to dull the terrible pain that accompanies the transformation process stops her. As the magician begins the process, Yennefer asks for her rice and the cut marks on her hands as a reminder of her former weakness. And the wizard informs her that every magic has a price. Having been reborn, she will not be able to walk. But the girl agrees to everything, even to the removal of her womb necessary for a complete transformation. The magician reads spells and the girl screams in terrible pain and rips the chains with which she was tied to the table. Her spine straightens, her entire body seems to melt and shift from one form to another. Finally, writhing in pain, Yennefer loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in the main hall of Aretuza, the initiation ball continues. Suddenly, Tisaya sees a door opening in which stands an unusually beautiful girl with violet eyes. She realizes that Yennefer has disobeyed her orders and hurries to take her away. But it is too late. The Aedern ruler has already noticed the beauty. He invites her to a dance where he expresses his desire to see her as court wizard in his kingdom. Tisaya has to retreat and only watch the dance of the king and the enchantress from afar. Directed based on a series of books by Sapkowski, The Witcher is quite curious, fascinating and vivid. The atmosphere of magic, the world of monsters and steel swords transferred quite well, so the adventures of the female protagonist will be even more exciting in the next episodes. Sunny Atlanta. The 13th day of quarantine in the city is on the brink of extinction. Panic and horror surround those who have managed to survive. No one understands how it will all end, but how did it all begin? 2 weeks before the current events. An ordinary day in Atlanta does not portend anything unusual. The city is bustling with life. Elementary school teacher, Caddy Frank, brings her students on a field trip to the local hospital. At the same time, on one of the floors of the clinic, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine due to an unknown illness. The woman remembers that shortly before the first symptoms appeared, she had contact with a patient from Syria who was sick. In another part of the city, Jenna also feels unwell, but not because of the virus. She is anxious about moving in with her boyfriend Alex. At the last moment, Jenna backs out and confesses to a cop that she is not ready to rush. Alex is unable to sort things out with his girlfriend because he is called to the department. There, a major meeting is being planned, where the police are asked to prepare for a difficult situation in the city. There is a suspicion that the Syrian brought an unknown virus to Atlanta and quarantine may need to be declared. Dr. Sabina Lomers speaks to the police officers. She also talks about the threat of an epidemic but assures the audience that nothing serious is happening. Another main character who will face difficult trials is Teresa. The pregnant woman visits her mother's shop, where her mother reminds her that she is expected at the adoption agency, which is looking for parents for her daughter. The reminder upsets Teresa, but her boyfriend reassures her and assures her that he has everything under control. They will run away tonight and no one will be able to take their child. Caddy's students perform for the patients, but the teacher is concerned about why Dr. Sanders did not meet them. The doctor on duty pretends not to know about the colleague's fate and does not tell the teacher about the infected doctor's condition. Caddy begins to suspect something strange is happening soon. When they were about to leave, the doctors announce that the children will have to stay a little longer. The hospital is under quarantine and everyone must undergo a thorough check. Dr. Lorms arranges a secret meeting with Alex and asks him to take the situation under personal control. She admits that she has extensive experience but has never encountered such a virus before. According to the expert, the danger threatens not only Atlanta but the entire world. On-call officers are sent to the Zero patient's home, from where the doctors believe the epidemic began. Cops protect themselves as much as possible with shields and gloves and convince the patient's relatives that they should also take safety measures. The boy is in serious condition and is taken to the hospital despite his attempt to escape. Caddy realizes that her son and his friend Thomas have run away. The teacher goes in search of the boys just as the Zero patient is being brought in. The woman notices the patient but refuses to leave the corridor until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Caddy. Together they search for the missing boys, and the pair witnesses an even more terrifying sight: the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her fiancé. Fresh news reports indicate that the situation has worsened. The Zero patient died after a severe period. The cops also learn about what happened to Dr. Sanders. But more frightening to the police is the fact that all the emigrants' relatives were also infected. This means the virus spreads very quickly and kills the host within 48 hours. Caddy finds the boys in a rat lab. It seems the danger is over, but the doctor informs her that the quarantine is extended for 2 days and no one will be able to leave the hospital earlier. During the report, Dr. Connor informs the police that they have identified the virus. He assures them that traces of the pathogen were found in the 0 patient's personal belongings, and it all looks like an attempt to deliberately cause an infection. Teresa arrives at the train station to leave for her boyfriend's relatives, but unexpectedly, the train refuses to take new passengers and passes by. Upon learning that Jake is locked in the hospital, Alex directly asks Dr. Lorms about what is happening. The expert admits that a border is being established around the area that cannot be crossed for several days. By evening, panic begins in the city. People are surrounded by an iron fence, and many find themselves separated from their loved ones. Teresa learns that she and Xander are also on opposite sides of the cordon, and the girl will have to decide what to do next. Despite the measures taken, the number of infected continues to grow. At night, experts conduct an autopsy on the 0 patient and discover that the virus affects all vital organs. Furthermore, there is evidence that it takes only 48 hours from infection to the end. There is no chance of recovery, and if a vaccine is not found soon, the world faces serious trouble. Alex manages to contact Jenna and asks her to stay in a safe place. The girl decides to lock herself in her office. Returning to her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander and tells him that she is okay. Despite this, the boy promises to find a way and get to her through the dangerous fence. Jenna is joined by her colleagues who did not manage to leave the city. Meanwhile, the girl's fiancé receives a warning that he should not break the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is asked to help the doctors sort through the belongings of the sick to find their relatives. Examining the 0 patient's mobile phone, the guy notices a frightening detail. A day before his death, the young man communicated with a blonde woman who had not been known about before. Jake immediately reports his findings to his colleagues, and the department decides to send a squad to search for the stranger. The police find the blonde's address, but her parents say she has not been seen since yesterday. Another emergency meeting is called, and everyone is ordered to find the girl within hours. While waiting for the doctor, Caddy listens to a news broadcast talking about the 0 patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. For the first time, the woman notices discrepancies, but her thoughts are interrupted by Dr. Connor, who assures the teacher that everything will end soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Leaving, Caddy still decides to ask about her suspicions. She was surprised that Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian who supposedly infected her, but Connor avoids answering, muttering something about differences in immunity. Jake is sent to find the girl, and the authorities hope to hide the fact that the infected person is behind the fence. But it is no longer possible to help the blonde. The cops find her in serious condition in the apartment of old friends. The blonde and her friends are taken to the quarantine zone. But Lorms admits to Alex that the situation is too serious. The virus spreads faster than they could have anticipated. Alex calls his fiancée to reassure her, but he does not dare to tell her what the city is facing. The police have been ordered to strengthen the cordon and use weapons in case of violations. More people with symptoms of infection continue to arrive at the hospital. Among them, Jake sees many children, but the doctor says that this is not the worst. The hospital is running out of free beds and soon there will be nowhere to isolate the sick. In addition to the bad news, the officer has an unpleasant task. Connor asks him to cremate the bodies to prevent outbreaks of other diseases. Another problem for the authorities is Leo Green, a local journalist. He continues to publish panic-inducing videos, and Lorms instructs Alex to stop the provocateur. The cop tries to negotiate with Leo, but the journalist is sure that the authorities are hiding something and he must get to the truth. A few minutes later, a new video from Green appears online, this time attracting the president's attention. Jenna's colleagues realize that they will not have enough food until the end of the quarantine, and the men decide to go to the store. The girl does not like this idea, but the majority votes to take the risk. Teresa's mother also takes the situation lightly. The girl sees her mother raising prices on essential goods to make a profit. To entertain the children, Caddy takes them to the roof. This gives everyone a chance to breathe fresh air, but the girl does not have time to relax. Thomas runs away, ignoring the teacher's cries. The girl finds the student on the stairs, next to a sick man. Drops fall on the boy, and it becomes clear that he is now infected. Thomas is sent to isolation, and the teacher blames herself. She tells the doctor that she promised the boy's father to take care of Thomas, but let him down. The men return with full bags of groceries, but Jenna does not let them into the office. She notices that her friend took off his gloves, meaning he could have brought the virus on his hands. A customer who was charged too much brings her friends. They raid the store, but Teresa's mother is saved by Jake's appearance, who received orders to patrol the city. Caddy finds Thomas's ward empty. She catches up with the boy at the hospital exit, and his father refuses to leave his son in the quarantine zone. The doctors have no choice but to let the patient go. Alex's pleas have no effect on Leo, and in pursuit of a hot story, he allows his colleagues to leave the closed area. He is not even frightened by the fact that one of the girls has symptoms of the disease. Alex and Jake manage to meet secretly on neutral territory. Both guys are nervous, but they have to work together. Leo Green tells the whole world how to leave the closed area. The police have to hold back the crowd while workers cut the ladder. This leads to serious riots, and the cops have to open fire to kill. To prevent such incidents, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, depriving everyone of the only joy, talking to each other. Caddy accidentally enters a closed room and learns the truth about the number of victims, among them or her students. At the same time, Jenna also tries to get to the truth, and she assembles a radio phone to call Alex. The girl has to climb to the roof to get the antenna, where she meets Sam, a technician who hid on the roof to avoid infection. Alex changes partners and goes on night duty. In the middle of the night, he notices an intruder and asks him to stop. The criminal turns out to be Xander, who is trying to enter the danger zone to his fiancée, but the cop does not let him do it and pulls the trigger. The bullet turns out to be rubber, and Xander is simply taken to the hospital. The officer visits him and apologizes, but warns that he will do the same thing next time. Leo decides to take advantage of this. He is preparing a scandalous report about the abuse of power. The store is visited by robbers again, but this time Teresa is also in danger. However, unexpectedly, the women are saved by another gang planning to profit from the quarantine. By the end of the day, Xander's ward is empty. The nurse says he left with Leo Green, but Alex does not have time to stop them. The duty officer reports that the guy has entered the infection zone. Dr. Connor shows Jake the rats that were injected with the medicine. Unfortunately, right before the cop's eyes, the animal passes out, and the hope for a quick rescue disappears. Jenna manages to call Alex, but the call lasts only a few seconds. The girl does not have time to learn anything. Leo accidentally learns about the call. He again hints to the officer that he has taken the wrong side and should think about what is happening. In gratitude for his help, Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. The guy completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but on it, the journalist finds evidence that his friends are no longer alive. After this, Xander finally finds his fiancée, but raiders block his way. The general panic is compounded by a new problem: hunger. People's food supplies begin to run out, and the government is forced to find a solution. Walking down the corridor with her son, Caddy meets an old man who supplies the hospital with lab rats. The woman notices another inconsistency. She saw Bert with the rodents before the quarantine, but he assures her that this is not the case. Lammers asks Alex to organize food delivery to the danger zone. The policeman asks for time to prepare, but is refused. He must do it by tomorrow without explanation. Alex has to ask Jake for help. The guy is also not thrilled with the idea, but they have no other choice. Early in the morning, the loading begins, and hundreds of people come to get their rations. The gang from the store also gathers for the distribution, and the leader orders Xander to go with them to stay clean. Jenna goes outside for the first time in many days to get some food. She approaches the distribution center, but a gangster car passes by, making her uneasy. Jake recognizes his friend and gives her a ration without a queue. He also hands her Alex's keys and asks her to hold on, as everything should end soon. Constantly thinking about the epidemic and inconsistencies, Caddy again turns to the doctor with questions, but he is clearly not willing to talk about it. The doctor assures the teacher that he knows no more about the virus than she does. The humanitarian point is surrounded by the store gang. There are many more bandits, and they take the food boxes to sell them to hungry people later. Alex is furious that the leadership did not listen to him, and the products fell into the hands of bandits. But Lammers does not see this as a problem. She believes that residents still have a chance to buy food and satisfy their hunger. Jake's partner turns out to be infected, and the officer offers him help, but the officer refuses to go to the hospital. He knows that no one can help him, and decides to solve the problem on his own. Returning to the shelter, Jenna falls into the hands of other bandits who also try to take the box. The woman is saved by Sam, whom she recently refused to let into the office, but the friends remember Jenna's recent act and, despite everything, do not let her or Sam into the clean zone. Alex and Jake meet again, and the senior partner admits that he no longer trusts the leadership. He tells his friend that, due to the robbery, he had to leave his subordinate in the danger zone. At this moment, this very subordinate calls Chief Besser and reports that their plan worked. Jake tells Caddy that she was right. Something is being hidden from them. Dr. Sanders and her boyfriend had no personal belongings, but the conversation has to be postponed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital, asking the teacher to find the boy. Their father died, and Thomas is left alone. Alex also begins to doubt the leadership's honesty, and he goes to Leo's house to hear his version. He finds the journalist drunk, but the guy comes to his senses and promises to help in the search for answers. Despite Jacob's persuasion, Caddy goes in search of Thomas. The gang is joined by the very cop sent by the police chief. He promises the bandits a radio phone in exchange for being accepted into the group. Thomas is not at home, but Caddy discovers her son, who secretly followed her. Quentin tells his mother that he knows where to look for his friend, and the company heads to the baseball field. The search for the truth has to be postponed. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house who is preventing it from being demolished. The cop has to spend a lot of time talking about the happy past the city has lost. Teresa's mother helps the lovers escape. She gives the couple a bag of baby things and tells them to wait for her in a safe place. The company finds Thomas's things, but they are surrounded by a crowd of crazy racers. Jake has to open fire, and only then do the young people continue to search for the boy. Caddy finds her son and his friend, but they are near an infected man. The teacher is frightened, but Thomas assures her that he cannot get infected. Xander and Teresa come to Jenna's office and ask for shelter. One of the girl's friends is against the couple entering, but Jenna lets the guests in without his approval. Thomas is placed in isolation, but Caddy has hope that the boy indeed has immunity and can save everyone. During the meeting, Alex hands Jake a flash drive with a damaged file. If it can be restored, they will learn the truth, but only Jenna can do it. In return, the officer also receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When he delivers the message, the stubborn man cannot hold back his tears. Teresa sorts through the baby things and finds the radio phone her mother stole. At that moment, the phone's owners appear at the door, holding a gun to the girl's mother's head. The company has to open the door, but the bandit refuses to take the phone and leave. He demands that Teresa and her boyfriend go with him. Unexpectedly, Jake comes to the rescue. He convinces the gangster to leave the office alone. Alex sees hundreds of people moving in an unknown direction, but no one can say where they will be placed. Jenna tries to open the file, but it is severely damaged. The girl does not have time to do anything with it. New guests appear in the office, a gang wanting access to prohibited drugs. The company begins to strengthen their shelter, but the intruders find weak spots through which they manage to penetrate inside. Tony decides to take a risk. He goes down to negotiate with the criminals, but the negotiations fail. The elevator returns Tony with an axe in his back. In addition to the deceased guy, one of the attackers enters the office, but he does not have time to harm anyone. The guy is infected and collapses at the entrance to the room. Jenna finally manages to restore the file, but the girl does not have time to watch it. The power goes out in the office, and all the doors are locked. To restore power, Jenna has to leave the shelter and go downstairs. Meanwhile, the bandits almost manage to open the elevator doors, but the girl raises the switch in time. On the way back, Jenna takes the radio phone and calls Alex. Talking to his fiancée, the officer hears her being attacked. The girl manages to break free and return to the office, but the intruders do not retreat and try to cut through the door. The company has no choice but to come up with the craziest plan. Alex tries to penetrate the closed zone to help his fiancée, but he is caught by the National Guard soldiers. Jenna orders everyone to take cover, and when the psychos burst into the office, Jake activates an explosive device. A fire starts, but all the attackers are unconscious. Unexpectedly, one of them jumps up and attacks Teresa's mother. The men manage to neutralize him, but the woman is infected. Alex is arrested, but unaware of this, Jenna asks Jake to call her fiancé and calm him down. She also mentions that the phone the bandits had has a government military number and they need to figure out how it ended up in the infection zone. Teresa's mother leaves. As a farewell, she asks her daughter for forgiveness for not wanting to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's contact with the infected, and the boy continues to look healthy. His DNA is implanted in rats to try to create a vaccine. Connor reports his observations to the leadership, but the boss tells the guy that they don't have time for experiments. Caddy and Jake review footage from surveillance cameras and find out that the zero patient was not the immigrant boy, but a certain Henry Burns. He came every morning to secretly meet with Dr. Sanders, and judging by the man's behavior, he knew about his illness. Dr. Connor allows Thomas to leave and informs everyone that the boy does not just have immunity, his body defeated the virus. This means that based on his DNA, they will be able to make a cure for the unknown virus. Jenna leads her friends to a church under which there are ancient tunnels. The girl plans to lead the group out of the cordon through them to safety. Alex tells Leo everything he learned from Jake, but the journalist cannot find any trace of Henry Burns. The men get the impression that the zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but in return she demands that the cop take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over for experiments in her unit. Dr. Connor disagrees with Lammers' decision, but she rejects all objections and insists that only her laboratory can find the cure. Everyone has hope for a quick return to peace and normal life. It seems not everyone will live to see this happy moment, but some decide not to waste time and enjoy the moment, using all possible safety measures. Leo finds out that 2 days before the epidemic started, Burns received a package with the virus. Now he wants to know who the sender was, but Alex asks him to postpone the investigation so he can carry out the order. All night the company breaks through the exit to the tunnel, and in the morning they finally go underground. At the same time, Caddy and Jake go to the meeting place to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Connor realizes he was wrong. The patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected. During the seizure he infects several more people, and the doctor understands that the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If he leaves the cordon, the virus will take over the entire city. The company has to return due to gas that has accumulated underground. They remain in the infection zone. Meanwhile, Thomas ends up in the hold the zone between districts. He is met by Alex and Dr. Lammers, but at the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and the boy is sent back. While Alex tries to figure out what to do next, he receives a voice message from Leo. The journalist claims that the virus was created by Connor. Alex and Lammers remain in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined to figure out what to do next. Jenna's company returns. The group could not go underground due to accumulated gas, but the office is empty. Teresa and Xander left to find a cleaner place. On the main street, the guy begins to suspect he was wrong. Hundreds of protesters are holding a rally demanding to be released from the infected zone. Xander tries to protect the girl from the crowd, but Teresa sees her mother in the crowd and tries to break through to her. Not wanting to risk his pregnant girlfriend, the guy decides to check who she saw in the crowd. Jake arranges a date for Caddy and the couple has a great time until a frightened Quentin runs into the room. The boy says that old man Ray took the other children and led them out of the hospital to break through with the others. Leo meets with an ex-girlfriend and asks her to get Connor's call details. He has no doubt that the doctor's to blame, but to prove it, he needs facts. Xander realizes that Teresa was mistaken, but as a result, he encounters an infected person. The boy manages to escape. Unlike Bert, the old man has his box of medicine taken from him and falls to the ground. The street riots intensify, and a squad is sent to the danger zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he does not listen to the doctor's orders, and several vehicles head through the cordon. Jake finds Ray, but the girl he took with him is not there. The old man abandoned her because of virus symptoms. Caddy spots Mary before Jake can tell her about the infection, and the woman takes the child into her arms despite the blood. The crazed crowd pushes Teresa to the ground. Xander runs to her but is afraid to touch his girlfriend for fear of infecting her. When Jake finds his friend, it becomes clear that she is now also sick. Caddy realizes this from her boyfriend's look and upon returning to the hospital, tries to wash off all traces of the infection. Leo gets the information he needs, but it does not match his assumptions. Moreover, his friend tells the journalist that Burns called someone on an encrypted phone that only high-ranking officials can have that day. Susie, Jenna's friend, confesses that she is expecting a baby. Going for a test to check this, Jenna meets Xander and Teresa, who stayed on the street after the riot. Caddy ends up in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the girl's nerves can no longer withstand it. After 48 hours, Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from the container. There are only 8 hours left until the end of Caddy's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa's baby is about to be born. Alex visits Leo and finds out that on the day of the infection, Burns did not call Connor, but Lammers. There is no doubt that she started the epidemic for some personal purpose. Dr. Connor conducts his first round after leaving isolation. When he reaches Caddy, he admits that he cannot release her. The onset of symptoms has increased, and 48 hours is no longer a guarantee of health. The soldiers who participated in stopping the riot were infected. Lammers reports this to the journalists, but she promises to find a cure and save the country. At Alex's request, Jake inspects the apartment of Leo's friends, who were also investigating. There he finds ashes, all that remains of the documents and evidence. When friends meet to discuss this, Alex realizes that Lammers and the police chief are involved. Dennis, the father of Susan's child, returns to the office, but the man shows signs of infection on his face, and the company refuses to let him in. To make it easier for the man, Susan tells him that there was a mistake. She is not pregnant, and he has nothing to blame himself for. Alex meets with the chief and says he knows the truth, but it turns out that Besser did not know that Lammers released the virus into the masses. Jenna and Susan fail to ease Teresa's pain, but as usual, Jake appears at the right time. The guy calms the young mother and helps her daughter be born. Alex asks Leo not to publish material against Lammers until they have substantial evidence. An argument begins between the men, and the journalist agrees to wait no more than 2 hours. Not wanting to waste time, Alex goes directly to the doctor and asks her to resign. Lammers tries to intimidate the officer, but when she realizes he is not joking, the woman promises to hold a conference and leave her post. Teresa shows Xander their daughter, and the baby is placed in a crib made of boxes. Jake tells Caddy about this joyful event, but the girl's delight is overshadowed by a cough with traces of blood. Lammers gives a press conference, but does not admit her guilt. She claims that Dr. Connor accidentally released the virus. Still unaware of this, Connor conducts experiments and tries to find a cure. Jake asks him to try to save Caddy, and the doctor agrees to give her a trial dose of serum from Thomas's blood. Old man Bert regains consciousness and discovers that his leg is broken. Despite this, he finds the box of medicine and tries to get home, where his wife has been waiting for him all this time. Connor learns what Lammers did. He does not understand why his colleague did this to him, but despite this, the doctor does not give up trying to save Caddy. Giving her the injection, Connor tells the girl how the virus penetrated their clinic. Jenna meets Bert and gives him her water. She also gives the old man a cart so he can finally reach his wife. After the injection, Caddy gets worse. She is tormented by nightmares and barely waits until morning. To support his friend, Jake brings a TV and invites her to the movies. The couple spends the whole day together, but Caddy gets worse again, and she decides to confess her love to her boyfriend, fearing that there may not be another chance. Jenna tells her friend about her conversation with the gangsters. Trader Miz offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it is very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jenna agrees to leave the others and go with him. Alex goes to Leo's apartment, which turns out to be empty. After losing, the journalist refused to fight Lammers, but later the cop receives a pizza from a friend in which Leo left him a note with an address and a key. Caddy gets worse by the minute, and Jake prepares to say goodbye to his friend. He asks the doctor to help him put on a protective suit, and when the girl falls to the floor, the boyfriend takes her hand to ease her suffering. The doctor tells Jake that he can say goodbye to Caddy's body, which is waiting for cremation. For the first time since their acquaintance, the guy manages to touch his friend's face without gloves. Jenna tells her friends about the opportunity to leave and suggests finding the money. But Teresa refuses to go. She wants her daughter to grow up a little. Arriving at the address Leo sent him, Alex finds evidence that will help him punish Lammers. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter reach Bert's house, Teresa's grandfather. The young mother plans to stay at her relative's house until the end of quarantine, but seeing the empty shelves, Xander insists that they must run. Alex learns about a certain Catherine Hops, whose son was connected with Lammers. From her, the man learns the address of the laboratory and heads there. While Dr. Connor tries to create a cure, news about him spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic wanting to punish the doctor, but Jake convinces them that he needs to be protected to be the first to get the vaccine. This is the last thing Jake can do before leaving. He decides to run through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and finds solid evidence of Lammers' guilt. He accuses her and names a true zero patient who fell ill several years ago. This time, Lammers does not argue. She admits she created the virus and believes it is needed for the country's safety. But now she asks Alex to postpone the battle and focus on fighting the virus, which has now crossed the cordon. An attack occurs in the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Connor has to give him the test drug. It is his only chance not to become a victim of the bandits. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him as soon as it is all over. Jenna's company also prepares to go underground to cross the cordon. At the same time, the body of the boy who tried to take the risk is examined, and an army is assembled so that no one else can cross the border. To prevent illegal crossings, the tunnels are mined and blown up. Alex tries to stop it, understanding that there may be people there, but the captain refuses to make concessions. Unaware of the government's plans, Miz orders the fugitives to prepare to descend into the tunnel. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Connor transfuses Thomas's blood to the infected gangster, hoping this will cure him. Despite all attempts, the gangster cannot be saved. Because of this, Jake has to save the doctor. The gang leader cannot forgive him for the loss of his brother. The explosions catch the group deep in the tunnel. The ceiling begins to collapse, and the company is divided. Teresa, Xander, and their baby are left alone. Connor finds a way to make the medicine, but for this he needs people with the same blood as Thomas. Jake tries to find volunteers, but no one wants to participate in the dangerous experiment. Then the guy prepares a speech in which he names all the dead. For their sake, Jake asks people to get tested and, in case of a match, become donors. Ms. leads the group to a dead end, but the guide does not give up and looks for new exits. Alex learns about this and asks Lammers to stop the explosions and bring people to the surface. As an exception, Lammers promises the officer 1 hour. After that, all tunnels will be destroyed. Jake's words convince people and they gather to get tested. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store and the girl decides to stay there until the end. The doctor finds blood with antibodies. A local priest can be a donor for the medicine. Old man Bert spills the last bottle of wine and adds a secret ingredient to it. He and his wife raise their glasses to toast that their suffering ends. Hugging on the couch, the couple prepares to go to a better world. Alex finds the fugitives, among whom he sees Jenna. The girl assures her fiancé will let them into the clean zone, but Alex does not know what to do. His time is running out. Dr. Lammers orders the tunnels destroyed, but at this moment, Leo's report about everything the blonde did appears on the screens. Alex does not let the fugitives go, but returns to the quarantine zone with them. And Jake, scattering Caddy's ashes over the city, prepares for a new battle with the virus that changed the world.